Welcome to Franchise Empires, where aspiring entrepreneurs learn exactly what it takes to become a successful franchise owner, from one location to 10 and beyond. I'm the Wolf of Franchises. Hey everyone, it's the Wolf. Today on the show, I have Greg Flynn. Greg Flynn acquired 7 Applebee's franchises in 1999. Fast forward to today, and he's the largest franchise owner in the entire world. His company, Flynn Restaurant Group, owns roughly 2,500 locations, including 941 Pizza Huts, 441 Applebee's, 369 Arby's, 283 Taco Bells, 192 Wendy's, and 130 Paneras. This makes Greg Flynn the largest owner in the world of Applebee's, Arby's, and Pizza Hut, the second largest of Panera, the third largest owner of Taco Bell, and the 5th largest of Wendy's. As you can imagine, he's a very busy man, but he was able to give about a half hour of his time to talk franchises with me. This is a conversation I know you'll enjoy, and thanks as always for listening to Franchise Empires.
The Wolf of Franchises is the CEO of Wolfpack Franchising, as well as a creator at Workweek Media. All opinions expressed by the Wolf and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Wolfpack Franchising or Workweek. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. The Wolf, Workweek, and Wolfpack Franchising may maintain positions in the franchises discussed on this podcast.
I think just as a starting point, I mean, you're based in San Francisco. You know, you graduated from Stanford, right? You have an MBA from Stanford, I believe. Yep. You're kind of just in the epicenter of tech and this massive boom that started, since the late 90s. Yet in 1999, you bought an Applebee's or 7 Applebee's, I believe. I mean, why franchises instead of a different career path?
Well, it's funny because, I didn't, graduate from Stanford and set out to get into the restaurant industry. I started a real estate business and, I got into restaurants almost by accident. But, it's funny, in 99, there were so many of my classmates that were, becoming millionaires on paper with nothing but a 10-page PowerPoint, describing their next .com. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm totally missing the train here. But I stuck to my knitting and it turned out to be for the best. Lots of the, quick money quickly went away and, very few of those ventures ended up really, getting anywhere and delivering value for, my friends who were involved in them. A few did, but, it's just like all gold rushes. I think, a few people make some money and most don't.
Yeah. So, today you obviously have thousands of franchise locations. Do you try to, and do you own a lot of the real estate on those locations?
Well, we've owned hundreds of parcels of real estate over the years, but it's not our objective to sort of make money through the real estate. Okay. And so we sell off almost all of it and lease it back. We've done hundreds and hundreds of sale leasebacks. We try not to overburden the business with rent, but I'd rather monetize that way and not, weigh down our balance sheet unduly. I am in the real estate business also as a separate business. So it's not like I don't like investing in real estate. I do like investing in real estate, just not that kind of real estate. Like okay. I can't add any value to that real estate beyond what I've already done by leasing it, right?
Yeah. So if someone's, thinking of buying franchises today, like a common data point and even just narrative that gets thrown out there is how, McDonald's is just big into the real estate game. But obviously, right, they started back in the 1960s. So, for the new franchise owner, is it really realistic, do you think, based on what you've seen with all your locations across the country, to find good locations where you can actually acquire the real estate as well? Or are you seeing mostly just you're going to be leasing as a tenant?
Well, it was much easier until the early 2000s.
Okay.
It was common to be able to just go out and buy, an acre, acre and a half, or 3/4 of an acre, whatever you need, and it would cost you, as little as $200,000 and as much as $1 million. But you could then build a restaurant and then sell it and make a profit up front on the real estate. The developers all figured that out. And now they want to be the ones to make that profit, not allowing the restaurant to do it. But not always. I mean, so, I think this year we're going to build in the order of 90 restaurants this year. And I would say, I don't know, probably 25% of them are purchases. So you can do it. It varies regionally. So it's much easier to buy land in the Midwest and the South and even some of the, mountain states. Very difficult on the coasts. If you can buy them at all, the prices are very high and don't really pencil. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Looking back to, when you got your start with acquiring those first Applebee's, I think I know your answer because I'm, a nerd who reads about the history of all these different franchises. But, maybe for the audience who isn't aware, why did you start with Applebee's and kind of what was, if you can set the stage on, what kind of brand and business was Applebee's in the late 1990s?
Well, in the 90s, casual dining was the hot segment. It was what fast casual is today. And, it was growing and it was, the very first sort of casual dining chain was Steak and Ale. And a lot of the, chains that followed were alumni of Steak and Ale that sort of spun off and started these things or had been, franchisees or became franchisees in casual dining. But, Applebee's was one of the earlier ones that was founded in 1980. And, from the time of its founding through the 2000s, it never opened less than 100 restaurants a year. It was super fast growing and the places were packed. They have bars right in the middle of the restaurants. Like it was super fun.
Yeah.
And, so when I looked at pivoting away from World Wraps, which is where I started, toward, sort of major chains that qualified for this sort of 100% non-recourse debt, that was my main reason for getting into, major franchises. I looked at sort of what brands qualified and all of the big quick service brands did. But in casual dining, there were only a couple and Applebee's was the best of that. And so, I said, let's get into Applebee's. It's doing really well right now. And it seems to have a good future. It's interesting. I'm very glad we chose Applebee's. It served us very well over the years. But the segment itself has had a lot more challenges than I expected. Applebee's has come out the absolute clear winner and all that. I'm just glad I didn't pick one of the other ones.
What are we talking, like Chili's or something like that?
Chili's, Red Robin.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Fridays, Ruby Tuesdays.
Ruby Tuesdays. That was
it's like a murderer's row of challenge brands, right?
Yeah, it is. You're right. And all right, so you were effectively able to secure a loan for those initial Applebee's, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong. Non-recourse meaning you probably had collateral in the form of property, but they couldn't come after Greg Flynn as an individual and any of your personal assets if God forbid things went bust.
Yeah. So just to clarify, I didn't have any personal assets to speak of back then, so wouldn't have done them a lot of good. Yeah. But no, it was a crazy moment in time. It was very like mortgage lending in the 2000s, but where you could borrow all of the price of a major chain restaurant, 100%, or they would even loan you the closing costs. So they'd loan you 102%. And you were buying on an asset basis, meaning, I bought the assets and you kept all the liabilities. And the restaurant industry has negative working capital, meaning you get the cash up front and you pay a lot of the expenses after the fact. So you actually have a cash balance that grows from the second you buy or open a restaurant. And so it was an amazing opportunity to buy a restaurant, borrow all the money, and you didn't even need working capital because it filled itself up with working capital right away. Now, that's not true any longer. Now you need to have serious equity in a business, and people have also figured out that, you need serious equity, right? And if a restaurant is going to trade at, 6 or 7 times, you'll be able to borrow, anywhere between half and 2/3 of that, but you got to come up with cash for the rest.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, that's wild to hear that, that was possible back then. And a common question that I got leading up to this conversation was just, hey, if you're starting from scratch today, how would you do it? And it sounds like, I mean, there's not like I don't think there's a cookie cutter answer, right? It's just, you kind of got to find a way to have some equity to be able to put up for the business.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think a good way to do that, if you're really just starting out from scratch, is to find a franchise that you like, and vet it, right? And by that, I mean, the best thing is talk to other franchisees,
yes,
who are in it, have been in it for a while. Franchisees are very collaborative. They'll help you out. They'll tell you the truth. I mean, unless you're somehow going to compete with them and open a store right next door, and then they may try to scare you off. But normally they're super collaborative and will tell you what's good and what's bad about it, what surprises they had, what are the biggest challenges, building the first one, operating it, and then growing from there. If you still are interested, then, go find a loan. There are lots and lots of banks that lend in the franchise space. And for whatever is the gap between, the price and your loan, go raise the money from friends and family, and just do it in chunks of $25,000. And what I would suggest you do is say, okay, I'm gonna take your money and I'm gonna pay you back when I can with a good return. But at the end of the day, I want to own this business. Like, I don't want to give you ownership of what is going to become the rest of my career. And I'll give you a good return, but after you get that return, it's mine. That would be my suggestion.
No, definitely. I love that advice. Notwithstanding, right, maybe how opportunistic you were, right, with the lending standards back then. I mean, you've still had a just ridiculous rise, right? I don't know of a single other franchise owner who's doing $4 billion in revenue with the breadth and depth of a portfolio. So, what has enabled you to, I guess, just keep growing and keep scaling, and really just build out this massive holding company of all these different franchises?
Yeah. So first of all, it's not a holding company. It's an operating company.
Okay.
And we have different divisions aligned with our brands, but this is not a passive investment for us. Like, I view myself as a restaurant operator, and everyone on our team does. That's what we do all day, every day. So, the starting point and the necessary, if not sufficient, condition for succeeding in the franchise restaurant business, and I'm sure this is true in all businesses, is running your operations well each and every day. So, everything we do prioritizes that. And nothing comes ahead of it. And if anything interferes with it, we need to stop doing that thing so we can focus on like running our restaurants well day in and day out. And if you do that, that will greatly enable your growth, because you'll have profits and you can reinvest those profits and do it in the growth. And, basically our business, I got into it, as I told you, by borrowing pretty much all of the money to do it.
Yep.
But then ever since then, with just a little bit of exception, we've grown the entire business from additional debt and cash flow, reinvested cash flow. So we've taken basically no money out of the business over the years. We've reinvested it all. But as the business has grown and become more profitable, and we've built, new units, and we've bought other, businesses accretively, it's thrown off a lot of profits that you can borrow against, right? So you reinvest the cash flow that you have, but also you continue to borrow more and more against your own business, and that provides sort of the equity for the acquisitions, where you can borrow against the thing you're buying, right? But you're also borrowing your equity against your existing business.
Yeah.
That's how the flywheel spins, right? And the whole thing becomes self-financing.
That's incredible.
But you need to get in it that first time.
Yeah. Has there ever been a moment where, maybe you thought you were a little over levered, or in an unpredictable event, maybe hit the dining segment? Was there ever a moment where you felt like it could all come crashing down, or has it been, I don't want to say smooth sailing, because I'm sure there's always things that happen. It's never a smooth ride, but yeah. Is there anything in your head that sticks out?
Yeah. So there have been lots of numbers like that. And, let's just first go back to how I got in the restaurant business, a concept called World Wraps. I didn't start it, but a friend of mine, Keith Cox, did. And
was that a franchise?
Well, kind of. They started it coming out of Stanford. He was my classmate. And I made like a little limited partner investment in it. And the first one opened and there were lines around the block and we're jumping up and down. Oh, sure, we've got Starbucks on our hand, right? And so the thing that we became totally focused on was how do we build as many as we can as fast as we can before someone steals our idea? Very stupid looking back at it, but that's what we did. And so we shook hands. I just, in my real estate business, bought 3 buildings up in Seattle. And so we just shook hands and said, I'll develop Seattle while he develops San Francisco. And I did it as a licensee, so sort of a franchisee. He kept the IP, but there were no franchise services. There was no, here's how you do it. Like we were figuring out this together at the same time. He had opened 1 restaurant, So I opened 14 of those. And it was the most bootstrapped thing you've ever seen in your life, leasing mostly former restaurant spaces, trying to convert them and slap a little lipstick on them and make them look like a World Wraps. And so you say, were there ever any moments of crisis? And I'd say every 2 weeks was a crisis, like making payrolls every 2 weeks. Yeah. Like, where's the money coming from? And, we were constantly just robbing from Peter to pay Paul. But, we sort of got it done. And it was, a sort of meaningfully profitable business by the time 1999 came around and I decided to pivot toward Applebee's. Not that it was, making a lot of money, but it wasn't, to the point where I was like, oh my God, this whole thing's falling apart.
Yeah.
And so that was the regular crisis. I got into Applebee's and things became less crisis filled because it's such a great business. And that's the great learning here, is that if you join an established, proven brand, generally that means a mature brand with thousands of units that have been successful everywhere, every geography, every demographic, through multiple economic cycles, your life is much easier. Right? Everything about it is easier, and so the frequency of crises, was greatly reduced from 19 onward. But there were moments. I mean, the most recent one is obvious. It was COVID, when the week of March 13th came around and, we went from doing, 100 in revenue down to 12 in revenue, in 3 days. And I went from having, 40,000 employees down to having, 8,000 employees. I mean, we didn't lay anyone off, but we did furlough. 27,000 people, something like that in 5 days. That felt like I was a dinosaur looking at the comet.
Yeah. Holy crap.
And, the restaurant industry utterly depends on daily revenues to stay alive. It's a very high volume but low margin business. So if those revenues dry up, the expenses keep ticking away and you're out of cash really, really fast. Yeah. So we had to make some tough decisions very, very quickly, sort of prioritize who we were paying and what we were going to support. Now, we made the right decision to keep all our restaurants open and to not lay off anyone, but to furlough those for whom we just had literally no need for that moment.
There's no work to do.
All making the bet that we were going to come back, that this was going to pass, we were going to survive, and we want those people back. And we didn't want our customers to think we were closed, and those were the right decisions. Something like 10% of all restaurants never reopened from the pandemic. Mostly those were full service restaurants, and mostly those were restaurants who made the wrong 2 big decisions to stay open and to furlough versus lay off. If you closed for almost any amount of time and you laid off, you had to hire people back to reopen. That was expensive and hard.
Yeah.
And that's why so many didn't make it. Right?
Wow. Yeah. I can't even imagine what that must have felt like. Well, so you own some, Applebee's, Arby's, Wendy's, Pizza Hut, some massive brands, right? Have there been any that you want to get into?
Don't forget Panera and Taco Bell.
Panera and Taco Bell. Yeah, exactly.
2 of my 6 favorites.
Yeah. Have there been any that that like over the years you were close to buying but didn't? Do you even at your scale? I mean, it's like a big decision for a franchisor, right? For someone to kind of let someone with the capitalization you have, and I mean, you can really influence a system almost with how big of a company you have. So yeah, have there been close calls like with brands?
So I think that's correct. You said you can influence the system. I think that's correct, and I know franchisors worry about franchisees, or really of any size, but especially the bigger ones, being a negative influence. We're very aware of that, and we are dedicated to being a positive influence and a force for good. Right? At our scale, we can be a force, but let's be a force for good. And I like to think that, over time we have proved that that's what we are. Anyone getting into the business, and especially as they get scale, everyone in this industry talks a big game, right? I mean, it's easy to say we're collaborative, we invest in our people, we invest in our assets. Ultimately, we all should be, and we are judged by what we do versus what we say. And we now, for nearly 25 years, have been doing this business a certain way. And that certain way is, I think, the way that franchisors would like us to do it. I mean, we invest in our people and our assets, and we run our restaurants well. We're also very, very collaborative and totally dedicated to never fighting with any of our franchisors and not undermining them publicly or privately, and just being symbiotic support partners, because that's what we ultimately all are at the end of the day. So I think that has gone a long way over time. There are just enough references I can give now of franchisors who would say, listen, you should not worry about them entering your system. You should be glad they're entering, because they will be a force for good in your system.
Okay. Yeah. Well, given how closely you work with franchisors, and obviously you've just operated multiple different concepts, from casual dining to fast food, right? Like, have you ever thought, let's start our own franchise and be the franchisor? Or are you just, why is being a franchisee, I guess, so appealing versus starting something of your own?
So I'm not sure I would ever start something of my own, because I think that's super risky. That's what we were doing effectively with World Wraps. I mean, technically started, but like from store number 2 onward, I was there. And that's a risk-adjusted return that I don't find attractive. So I'm not going to do that. That's why we belong only to, we're franchisees of only mature, proven brands. I think that's the better risk-adjusted return that I'm seeking. We have, occasionally looked at proprietary brands to buy and grow from there. And never say never. That may be something that we do, but we'll be very slow to do it, because it's not what we've done before. And we've, enjoyed success doing what we've been doing. And so, the safest thing we can do, as long as it continues to have ample opportunity for us, is to keep doing what we've been doing. So that's it. There's so much opportunity we've always had just being franchise operators that I haven't yet felt a need to sort of go beyond that to proprietary.
That makes sense.
Well, there's one other thing.
Yeah.
I like being a franchise operator. I really do. Like, if I had to choose, and I have chosen, right?
Yeah.
I have chosen to be a franchisee versus a franchisor, even now that we're in a position to maybe become a franchisor if we wanted to.
Yeah.
We each play a role, right? The whole franchise model divides and conquers. What they do really matters a lot. It's marketing and menu and prototype development, and usually they have some role in supply chain, and these things all matter, and training materials. These things all matter a lot, and they help us. But the thing that matters most, as I was saying earlier, is just running your restaurants well, and that's under my control.
Yep.
Like, in this arrangement, I control the thing that matters the most to my success. And this allows me to focus entirely on that. And I think that's really a big part of our success, is someone else has been taking care of the distractions of marketing and menu, all these things that matter. just so I could be totally focused on what we are charged with doing. And focus makes it better.
Yeah, for sure. No, and you're right. I mean, you do have kind of it is up, like the franchisee has the control of their store and to do what they can with it. So I definitely agree with that. And have you ever, it sounds like just that your experience with World Wraps has certainly, played a role in kind of how you've grown since then. Did you choose though restaurant to operate restaurants, and do you enjoy that versus, there's franchises in dozens of industries, there's big fitness, Planet Fitness is a franchise. Have you ever considered going outside of the restaurant world, or is it just at this point I'm sure you're kind of laser focused, but at any point did you think of adding a different type of brand there?
No. So focus makes you better. Yeah. We very deliberately decided when we got an Applebee's to do nothing but Applebee's until we were really good at it. Like we wanted to be kind of the category killer in Applebee's.
Yeah.
And so we did nothing but that for 12 years. And we got bigger, but we also got very good. And I can't even take credit for it, but our longtime, president of that brand for us, Dan Kresbach, and I, by the way, we're still together 23 years later. And in fact, he's right in my office at the moment. But, we got really freaking good at that. Yeah. And it was only in 2011 that we said, okay, let's take the experience we have. Let's take the platform, the capital, the team, and do more with it. And that's when we decided to diversify into other brands. We made a decision to sort of let the market tell us what it wanted, right? By mirroring the composition of the industry, right? We made a decision to get into quick service because that's 60-70% of all restaurants. Like, who are we to say what people want? That's what people want, right? Yeah. And then, a small but meaningful fast casual segment in between. And so that set up a 10-year journey to diversify in the restaurant industry as a franchise operator. So we've now done that. It is logical for us to now think about the next 10 years. What does that hold for us? And we've got some growth channels that are obvious, like just growing in on existing brands, becoming a franchisee in new restaurant brands. International is another one. It's interesting. There are restaurant franchisees around the world that are, pretty large.
Yeah.
All of them operate in multiple countries. And we're the only one that operates in only one country. Now, it's a great country. It's had ample opportunity. So why go elsewhere? But people make a lot of money in a lot of other countries, and I think we can too. So we'll look at that. But then there's, the adjacent industries that are franchised also, right? Outside of restaurants, but fitness is one of them. There are home services, There's health and beauty, there's hospitality. And we should be, and we are looking at, we're looking at all of those right now. Again, I'll be a little bit slow because it's not what we've been doing, but I think it is something we could do. In fact, most of those are probably easier to operate in well than the restaurant industry. And I think just like that 2011 moment, 11 years ago, we can say we can take our team and our capital and our platform and our experience and do it in some other industry. So we are actively looking at all of that right now.
Very cool. Okay, cool. All right. Yeah. I'll be looking for some press releases there on the Lucky brand.
Well, you're going to get a big press release on Monday.
Really? Okay.
Yep. So look for that.
I will.
It's in an adjacent industry, and it's one of the biggest deals of the year in it. So.
Wow. All right. Sweet. Yeah. I'll have my Google alerts set there then. That's good to hear. Do you? I'm sure you get asked this a lot. It's just the size of your company, and you're still privately held. I know, obviously, there's benefits to being privately held. Do you ever have the, have you ever thought about going public, or is that just not in the roadmap for you?
Well, sure. I mean, I've thought about it, and we are very unlikely to go public now or ever, for two reasons. One, I've got a bunch of franchise agreements that say I won't go public. And okay. So I'd have to, convince our franchisors that it was actually in our interest and theirs that we go public. That probably would just have to do with access to capital. For some reason, the private markets weren't providing enough access and for us to continue to build restaurants and things we needed it. But the other reason people go public are several. One is access to capital, and we have no shortage of access to capital being private. Both debt, mainly debt, but also equity. Those are very, very deep markets for good companies. Two, people wish to have sort of stock-based compensation and share equity ownership with their employees in a way that provides them some liquidity and a value benchmark. That's very legitimate. That's the most legitimate reason, I think, to go public. And that's something that would be attractive to us, but we're going to have to forego until we did. But probably the main reason people take their companies public, other than access to capital they don't otherwise have, is because they have a CEO that wants to, have taken a company public and wants to run a public company. And that's not what I want to do. You know what? I really like being private, and public companies throw up all sorts of, sort of perverse incentives to, have a very short-term focus. And we have always had a very, very long-term focus, and it's really benefited us. And, while I would love quarterly results to be good, I'd sacrifice them all day long for the 5-year or 10-year outcome. And so that's why that's the main reason we're very unlikely to go public ever.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I feel like some of the bigger names in public companies, whether it's, Warren Buffett or Jamie Dimon, there was someone recently, there's almost a growing petition to stop with the quarterly earnings reports. Cause like you said, it just causes this mindset that is too short term. And ultimately it's actually not in the best interest of the companies or the stakeholders, right. To be thinking that way.
Yeah.
Well, one more question that I'm curious about before we wrap up here is just with how big your organization is, and I'm not asking for the secret sauce here, but have you guys done anything in-house, whether it's technology or something that's proprietary to Flynn Restaurant Group that has maybe been a part of the success?
If I, had to identify any single secret sauce for our business, it's culture and structure. Maybe those are two things, but they're so intimately related.
Yeah.
We are an amazingly flat company. Right?
What do you mean by that?
And it's not very hierarchical. Your typical restaurant franchise operating business is like a classic pyramid structure where you got a franchisee sitting on top, and then there are layers below them, and the whole structure exists to implement what this guy decides, and he tells them what to do, and they go do it, right? We have a totally different structure. It's a fairly decentralized structure that pushes real authority down as close to the field as we can get it. And we share the wealth very generously down to that level. And think of it as a state and federal model where states are run by sort of state governors. We call them market presidents. They're my partners, right? Yeah. And we almost encourage, a pretty high level of autonomy because we think local owner operators run the best restaurants, and we want them to act like and feel like, and in fact, be local owner operators. But there are very real scale economies in the business, and you have all these above restaurant functions you need to do, and you need to do them well. And that's, HR, IT, purchasing, finance, real estate, training. I mean, there's just a bunch of stuff you need to do. And think of that as the federal level in our state and federal model. We do that for our restaurants, and we do it probably better at a lower cost, because of the scale and the people we can attract as a result of the scale to provide just world-class services. And this all sounds like pretty simple, but it's pretty complicated to do, and you need to be really devoted to it. And in our case, it really wouldn't work if we hadn't grown up organically like that over 25 years.
I hear you. Yeah. I'm sure like like if I saw an org chart, the structure would obviously be it wouldn't be super simple just to think up, but just a theme I've noticed. I think the biggest franchise owner I've had on before you owned about 140 Orange Theories, and then he's building a dog daycare brand as well. But just the themes of the most successful owners seem to be that the people underneath them have skin in the game. Whatever their management structure is, there's always just a way to really incentivize the people and empower them, right, to want to take ownership of their role and whatever locations are under their jurisdiction, so to speak.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, look, Greg, this was awesome to have you on. I'm glad you got forwarded that Twitter thread a while ago. I know folks, normally we plug the website or social media profile. Greg has made the very smart decision to not have any of those. But if you do want to check out his website of his company and all the brands he owns, it's FlynnRestaurantGroup.com. So thanks again, Greg, and hopefully we can talk soon.
Thank you, Wolf.
Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Franchise Empires. We're coming to you soon with actionable insights to take the next step on your franchise journey. So make sure to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen.